A marriage crumbles after tragedy when a wife seeks a fresh start with a younger man. Years later, at 60, is it crazy to seek love again? A story of betrayal, forgiveness, and hope. I often find myself wondering why I'm putting these memories down on paper, reliving events that happened so long ago. Is it some kind of therapeutic exercise? A way to make sense of it all, to find a pattern in the chaos? Or maybe it's a cautionary tale, a way to warn others about the hidden pitfalls in even the most promising relationships. Perhaps it's simply the urge to leave a record, to ensure that this chapter of my life isn't forgotten. Whatever the reason, here I am, ready to share a story that, while uniquely mine, touches on universal themes of love, loss, betrayal, and ultimately, the enduring power of hope. Looking back, it's hard to believe that nearly a decade of my life was intertwined with another person so completely. 7 of those years were spent as husband and wife, a bond that I believed was unbreakable. We built a life together, a life filled with laughter, shared dreams, and the everyday routines that knit two souls together. Now, years later, I see those routines as both comforting and suffocating, the very fabric that held us together also contributing to our eventual unraveling. We had 2 wonderful children, now grown adults with lives of their own. They are a testament to the love we once shared, a living reminder of the good times. But they also carry the weight of what happened, the silent knowledge of a family fractured. I often wonder how they truly feel about it all, whether they blame me, her, or simply accept it as an unfortunate twist of fate. My introduction to my wife was, to put it mildly, awkward. We met on a blind date, a setup orchestrated by well-meaning friends who believed we were a perfect match. In reality, we were as different as 2 people could be. She was vibrant, outgoing, the kind of woman who lit up a room with her smile. I was reserved, introverted, more comfortable in the company of books than crowds. I wasn't unattractive, but I certainly didn't possess the kind of charisma that turned heads. She had a way of drawing people in, of making them feel seen and heard. It was a genuine quality, a deep empathy that made her a natural confidant. I, on the other hand, was more of an observer, content to listen and analyze rather than actively participate. At parties, she was the social butterfly, flitting from group to group, engaging in animated conversations. I was the wallflower, hovering on the periphery, nursing a drink and trying to avoid small talk. Yet, despite our differences, something clicked. Perhaps it was the element of surprise, the unexpected spark that ignited between 2 seemingly incompatible souls. Or maybe it was simply the right timing, 2 people at a crossroads in their lives, seeking connection and companionship. Whatever the reason, she seemed genuinely interested in me, in my thoughts and opinions, in the quiet world I inhabited. And I, in turn, was drawn to her energy, her zest for life, the way she made me feel like I could be more than I was. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant, the kind with checkered tablecloths and the aroma of garlic and oregano hanging heavy in the air. I remember feeling incredibly nervous, stumbling over my words, and struggling to maintain eye contact. She, however, was completely at ease, asking questions, sharing stories, and filling the silences with her infectious laughter. I remember thinking, this woman is out of my league. We talked for hours that night, discovering surprising commonalities beneath our surface differences. We both loved old movies, classic literature, and long walks in the park. We shared a similar sense of humor, a dry wit that found amusement in the absurdities of life. And we both harbored a deep desire for connection, for a meaningful relationship that transcended the superficial. By the end of the evening, the awkwardness had faded, replaced by a sense of genuine connection. As I walked her to her car, I felt a spark of hope, a flicker of possibility that perhaps this could be something special. When she leaned in and kissed me goodnight, I knew that I wanted to see her again. And so began our journey, a journey that would lead to love, marriage, children, and ultimately, heartbreak. The months that followed our awkward yet promising first date were a whirlwind of getting to know each other. We spent hours talking, sharing our dreams, our fears, our pasts. I discovered that beneath her bubbly exterior lay a thoughtful, intelligent woman with a deep sense of compassion. She, in turn, seemed to appreciate my quiet strength, my dry humor, and the stability I offered. We explored the city together, discovering hidden cafes, quirky bookstores, and parks where we could escape the urban bustle. We went to concerts, movies, and art exhibits, broadening our horizons and sharing new experiences. I even surprised myself by joining her for a dance class, an activity that pushed me far outside my comfort zone but ultimately proved to be a lot of fun. As we grew closer, I began to realize that she wasn't just someone I enjoyed spending time with, she was becoming my best friend, my confidant, the person I wanted to share everything with. I found myself opening up to her in ways I never had before, sharing my vulnerabilities, my insecurities, my deepest fears. And she listened without judgment, offering support, encouragement, and unwavering love. It wasn't always smooth sailing, of course. We had our disagreements, our misunderstandings, our moments of doubt. But we always managed to work through them, communicating openly and honestly, respecting each other's perspectives, and finding common ground. We learned to compromise, to forgive, and to appreciate the unique qualities that each of us brought to the relationship. After a year of dating, we both knew that we were ready for the next step. We talked about marriage, about building a future together, about creating a family. It wasn't a question of if but when. The proposal itself was simple, intimate, and perfectly us. We were at home, cooking dinner together, when I got down on one knee and presented her with a ring. She cried, I cried, and we embraced, sealing our commitment with a kiss. The wedding was a small, intimate affair, held in a beautiful garden surrounded by our closest friends and family. The sun shone brightly, the flowers were in bloom, and the air was filled with love and laughter. She looked radiant in her white dress, and I, despite my usual discomfort with formal attire, felt a sense of joy and peace that I had never experienced before. We bought a cozy little house in the suburbs, a place with a big backyard where we dreamed of raising children. We furnished it with love, filling it with comfortable furniture, personal touches, and mementos of our life together. It became our sanctuary, a place where we could relax, recharge, and escape the pressures of the outside world. We settled into a comfortable routine, a rhythm of shared meals, evening walks, and weekend adventures. I continued to work as an engineer, finding satisfaction in solving problems and building things. She thrived in her career, climbing the corporate ladder and making a name for herself in the competitive world of advertising. We made new friends, couples who shared our values and interests, and we spent countless evenings hosting dinner parties, playing games, and sharing stories. We traveled, exploring new countries, experiencing different cultures, and creating memories that would last a lifetime. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. We had our share of challenges, our ups and downs, our moments of joy and sorrow. But we faced them together, hand in hand, supporting each other through thick and thin. I truly believed that we had built a solid foundation, a love that could withstand any storm. I was wrong, of course. But at the time, I couldn't imagine anything ever tearing us apart. Life, as it often does, threw us a curveball. We already had 2 wonderful children, a son and a daughter, who filled our lives with joy and laughter. But we both felt a longing for something more, a desire to expand our family and experience the unique bond of having another child. We weren't getting any younger, and the thought of our children growing up without siblings close in age tugged at our hearts. After many conversations, weighing the pros and cons, we decided to try for a 3rd child. The decision wasn't taken lightly. We considered the financial implications, the impact on our careers, and the added stress on our already busy lives. But the desire to complete our family outweighed all the concerns. To our delight, we conceived quickly. The joy and excitement that filled our home were palpable. We started making plans, dreaming of the new addition to our family, imagining what the baby would look like, what their personality would be. The children were thrilled at the prospect of having a younger sibling, eagerly offering suggestions for names and volunteering to help with the baby's care. We waited the customary 3 months before sharing the news with our extended family and friends. The announcement was met with an outpouring of love and support. Everyone was thrilled for us, showering us with congratulations and offering their assistance. The next few months were a flurry of activity as we prepared for the baby's arrival. We converted a spare room into a nursery, painting the walls a soft pastel color and filling it with a crib, a changing table, and a rocking chair. We shopped for baby clothes, diapers, and other essentials, carefully selecting each item with love and care. We involved the children in the preparations, taking them shopping with us, letting them help decorate the nursery, and reading them stories about becoming big brothers and sisters. They embraced their roles with enthusiasm, eagerly anticipating the arrival of their new sibling. My wife glowed with happiness during her pregnancy. She took care of herself, eating healthy foods, exercising regularly, and getting plenty of rest. She radiated a sense of peace and contentment that I had never seen in her before. We attended prenatal classes together, learning about childbirth, breastfeeding, and newborn care. We felt prepared and confident, ready to welcome our new baby into the world. Then, one ordinary day, everything changed. My wife called me at work, her voice filled with panic and fear. "Something's wrong," she said. "I'm bleeding." I rushed home, my heart pounding in my chest. I found her lying on the couch, pale and trembling. We raced to the hospital, praying for a miracle. The doctors examined her, their faces grim. After what seemed like an eternity, they delivered the devastating news: my wife was miscarrying. At 6 months pregnant, we were losing our baby. The world seemed to shatter around us. The joy and excitement that had filled our lives just moments before were replaced by unbearable grief and despair. We held each other and wept, mourning the loss of a child we would never know. The days that followed were a blur of sadness and pain. We went through the motions of life, but our hearts were heavy with sorrow. The nursery, once a symbol of hope and anticipation, now stood as a painful reminder of what we had lost. My wife took the loss particularly hard. She blamed herself, questioning what she had done wrong. Looking back, I can see the signs, the subtle shifts in her behavior that should have alerted me to the impending storm. But at the time, I was too caught up in my own life, too willing to believe that everything was fine. I wanted to believe she was happy. I wanted to think our marriage was strong enough to overcome the grief of the miscarriage. The restaurant job seemed like a good thing, a way for her to reconnect with the world and regain her sense of self. I encouraged it, even though a part of me felt uneasy about her working late nights, surrounded by strangers. But I trusted her. I believed in her. I thought our love was enough. She started working 2 or 3 nights a week, usually weekends. She'd come home late, tired but energized, full of stories about the customers she'd served and the coworkers she'd befriended. I'd listen patiently, asking questions, trying to show my support. But there was a distance growing between us, a subtle shift in her demeanor. She was less present, less engaged, as if a part of her was already somewhere else. I remember one night, she came home particularly late, smelling of cigarette smoke and cheap perfume. I asked her about it, and she brushed it off, saying it was just the atmosphere of the restaurant. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't just the late hours or the unfamiliar smells. It was the way she looked at herself in the mirror, the way she lingered over her appearance before going to work. She started buying new clothes, things that were more revealing, more provocative than anything she'd ever worn before. When I questioned her about it, she'd laugh and say she was just trying to spice things up, to keep things interesting. But I knew there was more to it than that. The restaurant owner was a decent man, a hardworking family guy who took pride in his business. He'd always been friendly and respectful to me, and I had no reason to suspect anything untoward. It was his son, the bad boy, who worried me. He was everything I wasn't: confident, charismatic, and effortlessly attractive. He drove a fancy car, wore expensive clothes, and had a reputation for being a ladies' man. My wife dismissed him as an arrogant jerk, someone she couldn't stand. But I saw the way she looked at him, the way her eyes lingered a little too long, the way she laughed a little too hard at his jokes. I knew that he was trouble. I knew that he posed a threat to our marriage. I tried to talk to her about it, to express my concerns. But she'd shut me down, accusing me of being jealous and insecure. She insisted that I had nothing to worry about, that she loved me and only me. But her words rang hollow. I could feel her slipping away, drawn to the allure of something new and exciting. The more time she spent at the restaurant, the more distant she became. We stopped talking, stopped sharing, stopped connecting. The intimacy that had once defined our relationship faded away, replaced by a cold, empty silence. I felt like I was losing her, but I didn't know how to stop it. I was powerless, watching our marriage crumble before my eyes. I wish I could pinpoint the exact moment when my wife began to stray, but infidelity is rarely a sudden event. It's a slow, insidious process, like a creeping vine that gradually wraps itself around a tree, suffocating it from the inside out. Looking back, I recall subtle changes in her behavior, almost imperceptible at first. She became more secretive with her phone, shielding the screen from my view whenever a text message arrived. She started working longer hours at the restaurant, claiming that they were short-staffed or that there was a special event. She became less interested in our shared activities, preferring to spend her free time with her new friends from work. I tried to dismiss my concerns, telling myself that I was being paranoid, that I was letting my insecurities get the better of me. But the feeling persisted, a gnawing unease that wouldn't go away. One evening, I decided to surprise her at the restaurant. I arrived early, hoping to catch her before her shift started. But when I walked in, I didn't see her anywhere. I asked the owner if she was working that night, and he seemed surprised to see me. He said that she had called in sick, claiming to have a terrible headache. I thanked him and left, my mind racing. I drove home, my heart pounding in my chest. When I arrived, the house was dark and silent. I found my wife asleep in bed, her face pale and drawn. I gently woke her up, asking her if she was feeling better. She feigned surprise at seeing me, claiming that she had fallen asleep after taking some medicine. I asked her if she had a headache, and she hesitated for a moment before saying yes. I knew she was lying. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the evening in my mind. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that something was going on. The next day, I decided to confront her. I waited until the children were at school, then sat her down and told her how I was feeling. I told her that I was worried about her, that I felt like she was pulling away from me. I asked her if there was something she wasn't telling me. At first, she denied everything, insisting that I was imagining things. But as I pressed her further, her composure began to crack. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she finally confessed the truth. She admitted that she had been spending time with the owner's son, that they had developed a connection, that she was confused about her feelings. I was devastated. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The pain was so intense that I could barely breathe. I couldn't believe that the woman I loved, the woman I had trusted with my life, was capable of betraying me in such a way. I asked her if she had been unfaithful to me, and she hesitated again before admitting that she had. The affair had been going on for several weeks, she said, and she didn't know how to stop it. I was speechless. I couldn't process what she was telling me. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of the betrayal. I felt like everything I had believed about our relationship, about our life together, was a lie. I asked her to leave. I was so angry and hurt. The revelation of the affair hit me like a physical blow. I felt winded, disoriented, as if the very foundation of my world had crumbled beneath my feet. The woman I loved, the woman I had built a life with, had betrayed me in the most profound way imaginable. I remember the immediate aftermath as a blur of anger, confusion, and disbelief. I paced the house, ranting and raving, demanding answers that she couldn't or wouldn't provide. How could she do this to me? To our children? How could she throw away everything we had built together for a fleeting infatuation with some jerk? She remained mostly silent, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and defiance. She claimed that she hadn't meant for it to happen, that she had simply been swept away by her emotions. She insisted that she still loved me, but that she also felt a connection with this other man, a connection she couldn't explain or deny. Her words offered little comfort. They felt like hollow excuses, feeble attempts to justify the unjustifiable. The pain of betrayal was too raw, too intense to be soothed by empty platitudes. I told her to leave. I couldn't bear to look at her, to be in the same room with her. I needed space, time to process what had happened, to try to make sense of the wreckage of my life. She packed a bag and left that night, leaving me alone in the house with the children. The silence was deafening. Every room felt empty, haunted by the ghost of what we had lost. The next few weeks were a living hell. I struggled to balance my work responsibilities with the demands of being a single parent. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and constantly on the verge of tears. The children were confused and upset by their mother's absence. They didn't understand what was happening, why she had left, why our family was suddenly broken. I tried my best to explain the situation in a way they could understand, but it was difficult. How do you tell your children that their mother has fallen in love with someone else? How do you explain the complexities of infidelity to innocent minds? I leaned heavily on my family and friends for support. My parents were furious with my wife, offering words of comfort and encouragement. My friends rallied around me, helping with the children, bringing meals, and providing a much-needed listening ear. Despite their support, I felt incredibly alone. The pain of betrayal was isolating, making it difficult to connect with others, to share my feelings, to trust that anyone could truly understand what I was going through. As the days turned into weeks, the reality of the situation began to sink in. My marriage was over. My wife had chosen someone else. My family was shattered. I had to accept it, to find a way to move forward, to rebuild my life from the ashes of my broken dreams. The divorce process was surprisingly amicable. We both agreed that it was in the best interests of the children to avoid a messy, contentious legal battle. We divided our assets fairly, and we established a co-parenting agreement that allowed us both to remain actively involved in the children's lives. The day we signed the final divorce papers was surreal. It felt like I was watching my life play out in slow motion, as if I were detached from my own body. I remember looking at my wife, seeing a flicker of regret in her eyes, a hint of sadness beneath her carefully constructed facade. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The trust had been broken. There was no going back. As I walked out of the lawyer's office, a free man but also a broken one, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held. Would I ever find love again? Would I ever be able to trust another woman? Would I ever be able to forgive my wife for what she had done? The weeks and months following the divorce were a blur of logistical challenges and emotional turmoil. I was now a single parent, juggling work, childcare, and the daunting task of rebuilding my life. The house felt empty and silent without her, each room a painful reminder of the life we had once shared. The children, bless their hearts, were incredibly resilient. They missed their mother, of course, but they adapted to the new routine with surprising grace. They helped with chores, offered words of encouragement, and showered me with unconditional love. Their presence was a constant source of comfort and motivation, reminding me that I wasn't alone, that I had a responsibility to create a stable and loving environment for them. My ex-wife, to her credit, remained actively involved in the children's lives. She visited them regularly, took them on outings, and made an effort to maintain a positive relationship with me, despite the circumstances. I appreciated her commitment to our children, even though it was often difficult to be in her presence, to suppress the resentment and anger that still lingered beneath the surface. I learned through the grapevine that her relationship with the bad boy was already on shaky ground. He was reportedly unfaithful, irresponsible, and increasingly reliant on alcohol. I tried not to take any satisfaction in her misfortune, but a small part of me couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. She had made her choice, and now she was facing the consequences. One evening, a few months after the divorce, I received a phone call from her. Her voice was shaky and tearful. She confessed that she had made a mistake, that she regretted her decision to leave me, that she was miserable with her new life. She asked for my forgiveness, and she hinted at the possibility of reconciliation. I was stunned. Part of me wanted to believe her, to welcome her back with open arms. But the pain of her betrayal was still too fresh, the scars too deep. I couldn't forget what she had done, the way she had shattered our family. I couldn't trust her, couldn't risk opening myself up to that kind of pain again. I told her that I appreciated her apology, but that it was too late. I had moved on, I said, and I couldn't go back. I wished her well, and I ended the call. Afterward, I sat alone in the darkness, wrestling with my emotions. Had I made the right decision? Was I being too harsh, too unforgiving? Should I have given her a second chance? Ultimately, I knew that I had done what was best for me and for my children. I couldn't sacrifice my own happiness, my own peace of mind, for the sake of a relationship that was built on lies and betrayal. I deserved better, and so did my children. In the years that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life, on creating a stable and loving home for my children. I pursued my career, I spent time with friends and family, and I slowly began to heal. I even started dating again, cautiously dipping my toes back into the world of romance. I met some wonderful women, but none of them quite captured my heart. I realized that I was still carrying the baggage of my past, the fear of betrayal, the inability to fully trust. I came to terms with the fact that my marriage was over, that my life had taken an unexpected turn. I learned to forgive my ex-wife, not for her sake, but for my own. I realized that holding on to anger and resentment was only hurting me, preventing me from moving forward. I accepted that my life would never be the same, but I also realized that it could still be good, that I could still find happiness and fulfillment, even after the storm. Life after the divorce settled into a new, albeit somewhat uneasy, rhythm. I focused on being the best father I could be, pouring my energy into raising my children and providing them with a stable and loving home. Work became a refuge, a place where I could lose myself in the challenges of engineering and forget, at least temporarily, the pain of my broken marriage. My ex-wife, I learned through the grapevine, was not faring so well. Her relationship with the bad boy was proving to be as toxic and destructive as I had feared. He was reportedly unfaithful, irresponsible, and increasingly dependent on alcohol and other vices. She had traded a stable, loving marriage for a fleeting infatuation with a man who was ultimately incapable of providing her with the happiness she sought. I tried not to dwell on her misfortunes, but it was difficult to completely shut out the knowledge of her struggles. We were still connected through our children, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of concern, even pity, for the woman I had once loved. There were times when I saw her at school events or extracurricular activities, and the sight of her always stirred up a mix of emotions, sadness, anger, regret, and a strange sense of empathy. She looked tired and worn, her once vibrant eyes now clouded with a hint of disillusionment. We would exchange polite greetings, but the conversations were always stilted and awkward. There was so much unspoken between us, so much pain and regret that we couldn't bear to confront. I learned from the children that she was working long hours at the restaurant, trying to make ends meet while her boyfriend squandered his family's money on frivolous pursuits. He was reportedly abusive, both verbally and emotionally, and she was trapped in a cycle of dependency and despair. I wanted to reach out to her, to offer her help, but I knew that it would be a mistake. She had made her choice, and she had to live with the consequences. Besides, I wasn't sure if I was capable of offering her genuine support. The pain of her betrayal was still too raw, the wounds still too fresh. One day, I received a call from her late in the evening. She was sobbing uncontrollably, barely able to speak. She said that her boyfriend had hit her, that she couldn't take it anymore. She begged me to come and get her, to take her away from him. My first instinct was to refuse, to tell her that she had made her bed and now she had to lie in it. But then I thought of our children, and I knew that I couldn't abandon her. She was still their mother, and she was in desperate need of help. I drove to her apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. I found her bruised and battered, huddled in a corner, terrified and alone. I helped her pack a bag, and I took her back to my house. I knew that it was a risky decision, that it could complicate my life and create new problems. But I also knew that it was the right thing to do. She needed help, and I was the only one who could provide it. For the next few weeks, she stayed with me and the children. It was an awkward and uncomfortable arrangement, but we made it work. I helped her find a lawyer, and she filed a restraining order against her boyfriend. I encouraged her to seek therapy, and I supported her as she began to rebuild her life. During that time, I saw a different side of her, a vulnerability and a remorse that I had never witnessed before. She seemed genuinely sorry for what she had done, and she was determined to make amends. I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope, a glimmer of possibility that perhaps, one day, we could find a way to forgive each other and rebuild our relationship. But I knew that it would take time, and trust was something that had to be earned, not simply given. Years have passed since the turmoil of my divorce. The raw pain has faded, replaced by a quiet understanding and a sense of acceptance. My children are grown now, with lives and families of their own. I'm proud of the people they've become, and I cherish the relationships we share. I never remarried, though I did have a few meaningful relationships over the years. None of them lasted, and I eventually came to terms with the fact that perhaps marriage wasn't in the cards for me. I found contentment in my own company, in pursuing my passions, and in cherishing the bonds I had with my family and friends. My ex-wife eventually left the bad boy and, as I understand it, worked hard to rebuild her life. I heard through our children that she found some happiness. I genuinely hope that's true. Looking back on the events that transpired, I don't harbor any bitterness or resentment. I understand that my ex-wife was going through a difficult time, that she made choices that she later regretted. I've forgiven her, not for her sake, but for my own. Holding on to anger would only poison my own heart and prevent me from moving forward. Which brings me to the question that prompted me to write this story in the first place: am I crazy to try this again? Is it worthwhile at 60 years of age? The answer, I believe, is both yes and no. Yes, it might seem crazy to embark on a new relationship at this stage of my life, after all the heartache and disappointment I've experienced. The fear of rejection, the risk of vulnerability, the possibility of repeating past mistakes, it's all daunting. But no, it's not crazy to desire companionship, to yearn for connection, to believe that love is still possible, even at 60. Life is too short to close myself off to new experiences, to allow fear to dictate my choices. So, am I going to actively search for a new relationship? Probably not. I'm content with my life as it is. But am I open to the possibility of love finding me? Absolutely. I believe that love can come in many forms and at any age. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, I'll be okay. I've learned that happiness comes from within, from accepting myself, from cherishing the present moment, and from appreciating the blessings I already have in my life. I don't know what the future holds, but I face it with hope and optimism. I've survived heartbreak, betrayal, and loss. I've emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. And I know that whatever challenges lie ahead, I'll be able to face them with courage and grace. So, to answer my own question, no, I'm not crazy to be open to love at 60. It is worthwhile to remain open to the possibility of connection, of companionship, of finding someone to share the journey with, for however long that journey may last.